Whew. Okay, well, a lot has gone on this week. I've been studying more about the COVID-19 virus, and what I discovered was a little bit odd. There's been a question about whether or not the COVID-19 is a super weapon. And, even if it wasn't designed as a super weapon, it appears that it follows some of the classifications of what a super weapon would be. One of the things that was most interesting to me was transmissibility, how easy it is to spread from one person to another. And it turns out that the transmissibility of this particular virus is extremely high. In its formation, it typically, in this particular case, from what I've been able to research, when you catch it, because you're going to catch it if you're near it. It's just going to get in you and you're going to have it. It's going to go in your lungs first, your mouth, and then your lungs, your tracheal, and then your lungs. That's going to be the first place it breeds essentially in you. However, when it first starts to replicate, it doesn't necessarily cause major issues. It just starts replicating. And when it starts replicating, a lot of people don't even know they have it. And unfortunately, there's some processes that occur when you do catch it. The first thing you do is the particles are breathed into the lungs, and then the virus begins replication. That's process one. Okay, not really in your mouth, but down in your lungs. And there's going to be little places, receptors down there, protein receptors that it binds to, and begins replicating. And when it does, unfortunately, it has some very interesting properties, and I want to discuss those real quick. So, step one, the virus is going to replicate. That's the first thing it's going to do. It's going to get in you, it's going to replicate in your lungs. It's the first place. Now, I found out calculated some different things about this particular virus. Because of its shape and size versus air molecules, it creates virtual vortex-creating dimples across the surface of the virus, similar to a top flight or AVX golf ball. As the virus spins through the air, it gains lift, a lot of lift. Even old golf balls would gain some lift from counterspin. This one is probably weighted similarly. I noticed the shell, it was very similar to a golf ball in the way that the outer protein shell and the inner membrane was very thin and the core was a little bit denser. There's some very strong similarities between this and the AVX and top flight golf balls that are the furthest flying golf balls in golf industry. So as the virtual dimpled or VC dimpled COVID-19 spins, it creates an area of low pressure above it and kind of drags itself up as it spins. So how does it spin? Well, it turns out that the posts are spaced just accordingly to where you have a mild hydrophobesis. It's a percentage, and essentially the virus auto-dries. It's a self-freeze-drying, similar to weaponized anthrax. The difference is we would be making that in ourselves and breathing it out. Water probably won't collect it. It takes a mucus or an oil. That's why the dry filters, little face masks, they're not working, and the Chinese are saying it's not working. But the ones that did work, they would take and they'd put on a face mask, then they'd put something else over that. They put another face mask over that. And what they did is they created a moisture-laden area of looked like a flannel that the doctors, one of the top doctors over there in the COVID-19 Wuhan hospitals were wearing. And essentially you'd have a sticky filter that would form almost within a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of talking and breathing through it. So we have, like I said, we have the self-freeze drying virus. So this thing is going to shrink down. Now we've measured it at 125 nanometers in its unshrunken form, but when it gets out in the air, they've stated that it can survive up to 7 days, which is interesting because that's the same rough period that I've seen from documentation on the AIDS virus. And the AIDS virus is, similar. It's the same kind of round virus, so it might have some similar properties in the freeze-drying aspect. Does that mean AIDS freeze-dries itself? No, not really. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this one in particular looks like it's got two things going for it for distribution and transmissibility. The virus itself can essentially float, and it just blows around like invisible fairy dust, because 125 nanometers, that's, you can't see it. You will not be able to see it. That's below the wavelength of shortwave radiation for UV, so you're not even going to see that. 125 nanometers, it would be invisible. Even if you had a pile of it in your hand, you would not see it. It's smaller than the naked eye can actually see. And the light that would be reflected off of it would be in the deep, well, it would actually be in the deep UV. So that might be one way to detect it, I guess, if you're to use a similar or an exacting frequency of light to bounce off the virus. So that might be one way to detect it. I know that UV light destroys it. So let's talk about real quick, this is going to be a real fast kind of thing, we're going to go over the board. Essentially what we're dealing with is a mammal-eating virus tumbleweed. That's really what it is. It blows around in the air, it replicates in our lungs, we breathe it out. Normally we're just going to breathe that out. As soon as the virus replicates and bursts from the cells in your lungs, it immediately begins its self-freeze-drying process, and it begins in the currents in your lungs. As long as it doesn't get stuck on the way back out, it begins lifting itself essentially out of your lungs using as soon as it's spun up the channels inside your lungs, it gains lift and exits your mouth. The thing is if you're in an area where you are rebreathing that air or breathing the air that other people have been breathing, you can actually reinfect yourself with the virus. You can give it back to yourself. Like, you might have it in your lungs, but when you breathe it out and breathe it back in, it gets in your mouth. And then if you drink some water or drink some soda, which is even worse, which I'm going to cover over here, the virus is now going to go into your digestive tract. And from the reports I've seen in China, I'm sure a few of you have probably seen the girl puking blood video that came out immediately. It was actually gray. That was really bad. There's a lot of videos that came out that were only online for like a couple minutes that were streaming out of China as they were essentially screaming for help over there because they were dying. They're dying really fast, and there's some reasons for that too. It seems to be it's a progressive disease that begins consuming your muscle tissue. The virus itself consumes your polysaccharides and glucose monomers for energy. It gets essentially into your muscle tissue, from what I can tell. They say that it only infects the digestive tract and the lungs, but in this particular case, it must be pulling from these other things. Also, we were finding evidence of reports of if you catch it and you beat it, if you catch it again, you die. And that's one of the things that's been reported from multiple doctors, multiple hospitals, multiple sources. And that appears to be because the heart tissue, it's affecting the heart tissue. Does that mean the virus can get into your heart? Essentially, that's what it's doing. It looks like it attacks the muscle tissues throughout your body, and that might be why we're having reports of massive pain, just like a normal flu virus. It's gonna, is that an electrolytic balance thing? Might be. But essentially, in this particular case, because we're having the heart attack now, they've described it because the heart gets attacked by a couple processes, protein processes and whatnot. But once again, when you look at heart tissue repairs itself very slowly. So if your heart tissue is damaged by essentially a muscle-eating organic solvent that dissolves muscle tissues, either as a direct effect or a byproduct effect, the muscle tissue in the heart repairs itself slower, and it takes like a year. For even minor damage to your heart, it can take months to a year to repair, whereas the other tissues, the other muscle tissues in your body can repair themselves relatively quickly. They're designed to do that, whereas your heart tissue repairs itself very slowly. And that's probably why people are dying from this, is it's physically harming the muscle tissues or fibrils of the heart. Now, they're also reporting that age has a big factor. Well, age does make sense because the older you get, the less your heart is going to repair itself. So this virus, or super weapon, essentially, its effect is to kill the elderly. Like, the older you are, the older your heart is, the more likely you are to die from this. I mean, just straight up. It's because it's attacking your heart tissue. So, how could you avoid that? Well, I know that cayenne can enter the bloodstream, so that might be one definite defense. And I know cayenne has this really good effect. I know there was some alcohol cults. I guess there was like 50 people or something that died the other day, or 15 people that died the other day from. Now that's a big difference in number. I can't remember if it was 15 or 50. Anyways, a bunch of people died. Might have only been 35. Who knows? A bunch of people died from like drinking all this alcohol because they had the coronavirus. They're like, we're gonna die, so they just kept drinking alcohol, hard alcohol, until they basically died of alcohol poisoning. And that may be because somebody else reported, hey, I was able to cure myself with this. Either way. So let's look at what we got here. In the way of viral positives, this one has a lot of things going for it. First is your viral replication exits the lungs via coughing. You can reinfect yourself and others because it freeze dries, it self dries, has mild hydrophobesis. It auto dries, water won't collect it. It takes mucus or oil, sticky surfaces collect it, mouth, eyes, or open wounds. It appears it may be able to enter the bloodstream or local tissues and begin replicating there as well. But that's, of course, just because we're talking about something that seems to consume muscle tissue, or at least the polysaccharides and glucose monomers. We need to have sticky masks to be able to collect this. There are certain filter materials that are sticky, and we probably need to get those to be able to get this rolling. Sorry, I had to check to see if I was still recording. This one doesn't have a light on the front. Who designed that thing, right? All right, so first you get the coughing, then it reinfects, then it gets in your digestive tract, then of course your guts start hurting and bleeding because this thing's just eating holes in you, and then of course your stool and vapor can infect others as well. This whole process, and then at some point it's going to enter into your heart, and when it enters your heart, you're going to know it, because what's going to happen, aside from if it's not entering your heart, it's going to steal from the heart. It's going to steal what the heart needs to stay surviving. So what I've seen on reports is that people suddenly feel very weak. They feel very tired. And that's going to be one of the predecessors to knowing that you have the virus, is you go from feeling great and normal and you're doing your regular routine, and now coffee, instead of making you, and sugar and sweets and stuff, instead of making you feel more awake, is going to make you feel sleepier. It's going to make you feel tired. It's going to make you feel like you just you can't get enough sleep. Like every day it's going to be like you're just dragged down by this. And as reports have said, some people can have it and not show any symptoms at all. But that'll be one of the symptoms you'll definitely notice, is that you will suddenly just you never have enough energy. And I know some people, I never have enough energy anyways, but this is real. I mean, like you see people just slouching and they just can't move. And those are most likely the people that are going to be the first noticeable, is that energy thing. So a lot of them they're gonna consume massive more amounts of sugar, caffeine, carbs, and unfortunately that's going to help the virus along. It's going to decrease its processing time, increase its infectivity. It's going to just go blah, and somebody's going to go from I'm not feeling good to I'm super, super sick, because now the virus goes from an inactive state to a super active state because of all of the carbs and the sugar and the caffeine and everything else that you're consuming to make yourself feel like you have more energy. But of course it kind of snowballs the virus. It just makes it explode in your body. And so to prevent that, there's been some reports and research to indicate, believe it or not, once again, it's alcohol. I know everybody's like, oh, don't drink alcohol. Alcohol has a suppressive effect on it. It does. Cayenne, another one. Lime juice, lemon juices, both of those can mess with the pH and kind of screw up the virus's ability. Zinc has been proven to halt viral replication. If you're not taking zinc already, you sure should be, because that's going to be one of your biggest halts for stopping viral replication. This virus or another virus, but this one in particular you might want to stop, because the longer it stays in you, you are on a slow motion death march. It is a muscle eater. It's just going to dissolve you, kind of like AIDS. It's going to waste you from the inside. And the muscle it seems to attack is the heart. Maybe because it's associated with the lungs, perhaps the virus is pulling those polysaccharides and glucose so strongly in your lungs that it pulls what the heart needs to repair itself away from it. And then the heart gets weaker and weaker and weaker. Eventually you die. And it's not really an eventually thing, I mean, it's like really fast, and that's one of the other things is it seems to kill really, really fast, and that's one of the problems. So, UV light to prevent reinfection. I've been noticing that I've had sick people around me at work and things, and I've been using portable UV sources, and they keep getting sicker, and I'm not. So that's probably because this stuff doesn't like UV. Those protein towers, the S proteins, and just the virus itself doesn't like protein, or it doesn't like UV. The UV I've been using, of course, is the black light, and from all the reports that I've read, the 400 or 380 to 400 nanometer UV light will harm and destroy the virus. It just takes a little bit longer. But it's just like getting slapped. I mean, if somebody punches you or slaps you, you're going to stop doing whatever, your processes are going to be messed up. In the case of UV, it's the same thing. UV slaps these things. Now, admittedly, they're 125 nanometers, so you're going to need a lot of UV light to be able to knock these particles around. You're going to have to charge the air. You're going to have to make the air an unwelcome host for these. And I think they're auto freeze drying, and they're shrinking a little bit too, so that's going to be even smaller. They may be even smaller in their freeze dried state. And that's one of the problems we're having trouble getting rid of this stuff. But that's the main problem I wanted to talk about today. Is it's an organic solvent. It works its way into the heart muscle by heat bleaching heart muscle tissue. Since heart tissue takes longer, a year or longer to repair after damages, eventually you get heart failure. This is a real wrath of God virus. This is a global killer. It infects. Now, interestingly, why I say the wrath of God virus, the unholy shall perish or whatever. The first thing it does is it infects and kills promiscuous people. Now, these are beautiful people. These are people who get around. These are people who are players. These are people who are dressing the nicest, or have the most sexual partners. They're the ones that have the most boyfriends, girlfriends, dating, hand-holding, kissing, sharing drinks, anything where you can come in close contacts with multiple people, hugs, kissing, all that stuff. If somebody's a carrier, or let's say the promiscuous person is a carrier, because that's generally what happens, is they have multiple partners, and then suddenly one of those partners gives it to that one guy or girl, and then that becomes a super carrier and just goes pow, and then you get an open cell that floods across all the people that are boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It just floods across those waves, so you get these doom 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 doom, and that's the promiscuous people first, and then the immunocompromised is next, because within the promiscuous groups of people, there are immunocompromised, or people that are maybe not genetically superior. They have some issues physically, they have some issues genetically to where they have problems with immune systems. And those will be the people that would be getting it next. So first it'd be the promiscuous people, then the immunocompromised people, and then you'd have groups of uncleaned or uncivilized people that don't have UV technology, that don't use bleach, that don't clean their house, that don't wash their clothes, that don't do that. So your homeless people, all your people that's like down the chain, but it just keeps on going down. So eventually, from a human perspective, this is going to spread through the ranks of humans really quickly, and it's going to infect a lot of people. And like I said, the longer you have it, the closer you are to death. It's almost like when you catch it, the hourglass flips, and you have that much time to get rid of it and not be reinfected by it. So the only thing that's really going to work in this case is complete quarantine. You have to completely lock yourself in, don't go out. Hopefully you get yourself better from this, but that's really going to be the only way, other than a vaccine and deployable UV light around you all the time, that prevents it from getting into an open wound or into your mouth and eyes and things like that. But this is the main zone you got to protect. Okay, other than that, I just really want to go over this lift thing. That's what's keeping it, that's what's spreading it, that's what's keeping it airborne and spreading it so far through the world. How can you prevent it? Well, it seems like age and condition, survival rate is going to increase in long term. So you're going to have like your athletes, your people who are really in shape. There's going to be a balance though. You're going to have people that have fast metabolisms and they have maybe a store of energy. So when they do get sick, they can not eat for a while and they'll survive too. But the people that have they're taking you know, the muscle drinks and things like that. Protein, the high protein, low carb diets, those people are going to survive. People that exercise, people that don't have problems with their heart right now, people that are younger, people whose heart beats faster and the lungs work a little bit better and a little bit faster. So people who smoke, they're pretty much done. People who exercise and eat regularly, people who sleep, better chance. But the more you sleep, the better chance you have. So staying up to the edge of every night and trying to avoid getting this and staying sick, trying to avoid getting this is going to be really hard because you're going to stay sick. And you're going to keep getting sicker and sicker and sicker the more you stay up. And the more carbs and sugars you pump into your body, the worse it's going to get. And the worse it's going to get for you and all your family. Anyways, in the next little bit, if you don't want to get immediately reinfected, one of the things I suggest, of course, is don't get in front of people that spit when they talk. Just stand back. You know who they are. And unfortunately, they talk so much they're probably the boss. Bosses. There's no real way to avoid this, and it's eventually going to affect all mammals, all muscle-based creatures that have the polysaccharides and glucose and lungs breathing oxygen. So the fish will probably survive this. But this particular one it's just going to keep spreading. It's just crazy. The way this spreads, the way this shape. This is the shape. The shape tipped me off. I'm like, wow, look at that. And I started comparing it to the AVX and the top flight balls, and I'm like, oh crap. So it just goes into the air. As soon as somebody sneezes, it stays in the air for hours, just blowing around, maybe days. It just blows around, blows around, blows around, blows around. It does say days, because I've seen top experts that say even in vitro, in a petri dish, it'll survive for 7 days. Just not even in a host. And combined with this and the fact that it auto freeze dries itself when it spins, you're basically talking a super anthrax that is being spread from people to people. This isn't just a normal virus. This isn't just a normal flu. This is way different. Because some golf balls, as you golfers know, they don't fly very well. But there's special ones that are even banned in tournament. You can't even use them because they fly so well. And that's what the COVID-19 is. Physically, that's what it is. When it's released, it keeps flying. It just keeps flying. And anything that bumps it, anything that makes it spin. Let's say you're walking along and it's on the ground and it's not attached to anything, it's not stuck to anything, and you're walking along. If it's a dry surface, you're going to kick it back up. It's just going to be like a tumbleweed, it's going to be like little tumbleweeds, just flying around, bumping into stuff, grouping up into corners. I mean, hospital is going to be the worst. If you get this and you run to a hospital, that place will probably be crawling with these things. So, and I haven't seen